I want to talk to you about interviews because interviews can be really nerve-wracking and it can be a bit of a battle how to get your head around the mindset around interviews. And here are a whole load of tips and tricks that are going to help you prepare for that job that you really want. So the first off is prep. You need to study the company. Look up the values that the companies have, like working with us, it will normally come under a tab under the menu, and understand exactly what the company does. What products does it offer? What is the business that it does? And if you don't understand anything, just Google terminology or phrases so you can be fully prepared going into the interview exactly who you're interviewing with. Another thing that I would do is understand exactly which countries they work in. Are they a global company? Do they work from office? Are they remote? I think understanding that kind of thing is really good as well, because the way that an international company might work will be quite different to one that is just local. I would also look at who is interviewing you. So when you get that email invite, you'll see the names of the people that you're invited to. And I would actually look those people up on LinkedIn. For me personally, I always kind of like to know what that person looked like and what their role in the company is. And if you don't recognize the title that that person is, again, Google that title, use ChatGPT so you can understand exactly what that role of that person has who's interviewing you. I would also go through, you'll probably hear this a lot, but like the typical common interview questions. So it'll be, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you want to work for us? Or give me an example when. That's a really common one. It's like, give me an example when something didn't go your way. And when you answer this question, you need to answer it in, so you could kind of talk about a situation when, for example, this person I was working with, I was trying to get this project delivered and they just weren't really on board with it, and I didn't really understand why. But what I did was I went away, I thought about it, and I could understand that actually maybe this person was feeling a bit insecure about their role, because we were actually bringing in a whole new tool which was going to make it easier for people to manage it themselves rather than having to go for this person. So she was actually insecure about her job role. When I obviously you dealt with that, so maybe it wasn't at your level you need to deal with, but she needs to be reassured by her manager. So you would go to your boss and they would talk to each other and reassure that person. Then when they came back to the project, they were actually really on board with it. They understood that actually that what that would do would be freeing up their time to do that very manual work that they were doing and free them up on exciting new stuff. So you got to talk about things like that. So it's like, what was the problem? How did you overcome it? And what was a positive outcome? You need to have a positive outcome, not just kind of rant on about how this person was really difficult, or I had a fight with this person. Yeah, don't talk about that kind of stuff. You can also go to ChatGPT and say, what would be the common interview questions for X role, and that will kind of spit out a whole load of questions so you can kind of prepare ahead of time. Also, what they're always going to ask you is, what questions do you have? You need to have some valuable questions that you want to go to the interview with. For me, having been now 40 years old and worked for quite a few different companies, culture is a really important thing for me. So I'd be asking, what is the culture like at your company? And that would kind of sum up how a company operates. Does it have like a blame culture? Do you work together as a team? Some companies do like a volunteer day, or they have good benefits. Like, culture is really the day-to-day of how you work with other people. And I find it's really important, because if you want to learn and grow and things, you just want to work with a company that supports that. It's really simple as that. Another question you could ask is, what would a day-to-day look like in this role? I think that's a really good question, because it sets the expectation, what is expected of you and what the kind of role would be. I mean, I kind of think that's a really good understanding for a role that maybe isn't that well defined in a job description. But if you're going for like a true role, say for a product owner role, that is very kind of standardized, so you would actually kind of know what you would be doing. You'd be doing 2-week sprints with all the ceremonies involved in it and reporting and doing UAT testing, although unless you have UAT testers. But another good question would be, what do you foresee as the biggest challenge in this role? Or what would you like this role to achieve in the next 30 to 90 days? Those kind of questions are really good if you want to understand a bit more about how the company operates. I would also be looking at what tools that company specifically uses. So you want to go to the job description, and they'll probably generally kind of mention what tools they use. And so you want to make sure that you are aware they're using Jira, they're not using Teams, for example. And you want to research those tools ahead of time so you know exactly what they're talking about. And again, that could probably lead into some questions too that you might have. Now, all this kind of prep will obviously help you with your anxiety or like nerves if you get interview anxiety, because it kind of helps you prepare so you know what's expected. But there's some particular things that I've done in the past that have really helped with my anxiety, which has definitely been something I have battled with over the years. So the first would be, it's like a technique that I would say is like practicing what you would actually go through in your mind, and you can actually trick your mind that you've already done this before. So for example, if you drive to an interview, you imagine yourself leaving your house, you get in your car, you drive to the interview, you park up. You go inside the building, you'll generally be meeting somebody at reception, maybe you sit down and wait for them to come meet you. Then you're meeting the person, you're greeting them, you're smiling, you're being friendly and confident. Then you walk into the interview room, you sit down, you answer all the questions, and you imagine yourself in that position. So do it with your eyes closed. I should have said that at the start. But do it with your eyes closed and imagine this whole scenario. You're going for the interview, you're really confident, you're answering their questions. And also another tip as well that I've kind of learned along the way is, if you kind of get stumped for an interview question, you just say, oh, I just need a minute to have a think about that. It's better than just sitting there and not saying anything, or just say, oh, that's a really good question, let me just have a think about that. And it just kind of gives you that time to really kind of gather your thoughts. But while you're imagining this, if at any point in time if you're working through that scenario you feel anxious, rewind and roll it back and then redo it again. And you want to keep doing the scenario in your mind until you do the whole interview with no anxiety. It actually works really, really well to prepare you ahead of time for an interview. Some other things that I would do is, the whole feeling of anxiety is actually a build-up of adrenaline, and that will actually either make you fight or flight mode. And what you want to do to get rid of that adrenaline is actually use it up, and that's in your muscles. Your biggest muscles are actually your glutes, so your bum, or your thigh muscles. So you can actually squeeze them and actually help get rid of that adrenaline. Or you can like, if you go to the bathroom before your interview, for example, just jump up and down like a little bit. Or even walking slowly up to like the office, just so you can kind of like gather yourself. That's a really good way you can actually get rid of the adrenaline actually during an interview as well, because most people won't notice that you're clenching your glutes. Another thing that I would do is, I suffered really badly from anxiety, so I actually got medication to help me. That was from my GP, and not everyone may agree with this, but I used to get so anxious that I would get like a total mind block, and I just felt like I cannot do an interview to the best of my ability without a little bit of help. But I mean, I had really bad anxiety. So I really hope you found these tips useful. This is exactly how I've got through most interviews, and definitely prepping before the interview. So reminding yourself what the job description says. You don't want to be going into an interview and thinking, oh, I thought it was this job description. Actually, it was a totally different one. Go back in just before your job interview. I'm talking like 20-30 minutes before the interview. Go back over the JD, go back over the company website just to refresh your mind. You obviously should be prepping like the day before, at least a few hours before your interview again, and definitely make notes about your questions. And that's something I would do as well, was like I'd go into the interview and I'd even have my notes and be like, okay, what questions do I have to ask? Like, there's nothing wrong going and referring to notes. But yeah, I really hope you found this useful, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up and like for more.